Hello, everyone. Tonight, we're standing at a windy cemetery hill with a black grandmother whose hands are wrapped around two small boys, while the autumn air cuts straight through her black dress. Right now, she's clutching her grandsons at her only son's grave, thinking the worst part of the day is over, when her daughter-in-law walks up in designer heels with a manila folder and a smile that feels colder than the marble headstone. In just a moment, you'll hear her say the words that change everything. Keep the kids. I want the beach house and the company, as if motherhood were something you could trade for ocean views and a payout. You'll follow this grandmother into a cramped apartment, watch her work double shifts to raise two abandoned boys, and then stay with her as one of those boys grows up, becomes a millionaire, and decides exactly what justice looks like when the past comes knocking for payment. If you've ever felt like someone treated children as collateral, or watched a person choose money over the very family you would die to protect, this story may land so close to your own scars that you might not emotionally survive it. So, before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, drop your city and your local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're listening from and how our little nighttime circle stretches across the map. Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on a fan for a gentle hush of noise, and let's begin our journey together tonight. I was at my son's grave holding my grandchildren when my daughter-in-law came closer and said, "Keep the kids. I want the beach house and the company." I couldn't believe it. But 17 years later, one of my grandchildren became a millionaire, and what he did. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought I'd be burying my son at 59. The autumn wind cut through my black dress as I stood at Leonard's graveside, holding my 8-year-old grandsons close against me. Xavier pressed into my left side, his small body trembling with tears he was trying so hard not to shed. Malik leaned against my right hip, thumb in his mouth for the first time in 2 years. The cemetery was full of people who loved Leonard. His college friends, co-workers from the construction company he'd built from nothing, neighbors who'd watched him grow up. Everyone except the person who should have been there most of all, his wife. Camille stood 15 feet away from us, checking her phone. Even at her husband's funeral, she couldn't be bothered to comfort her own children. Her black designer dress probably cost more than I made in 3 months working at the hospital, and her heels clicked impatiently against the ground every few minutes. I watched her during the service, searching for any sign of grief, any indication that she understood what we'd lost. Leonard had been everything to me. My only child, my pride and joy. The man who called me every Sunday without fail and brought the boys to visit every other weekend. To her, he'd apparently been nothing more than a provider. When the last shovel full of dirt hit the casket, I felt something inside me break. The finality of it. My boy was gone, and these 2 little ones clinging to me were all I had left of him. "Grandma Marion," Xavier whispered, tugging at my coat. "When can we go home?" Home. Where was that now? Leonard's house felt too empty, too quiet without his booming laugh filling the rooms. My small apartment barely had space for weekend visits, let alone 2 growing boys. "Soon, sweetheart," I murmured, stroking his dark hair that looked so much like his father's. That's when I saw Camille walking toward us. Not to comfort her children or share in our grief, but with a manila folder tucked under her arm and an expression I'd never seen before. Cold calculation mixed with something that looked almost like excitement. "Marion," she said, her Irish accent making my name sound sharp and foreign. "We need to talk." I tightened my arms around the boys. Something in her tone made every instinct I had scream danger. "Can't this wait? The children need stability," she interrupted, opening the folder. "That's exactly what we need to discuss." She pulled out a thick stack of papers already filled with signatures and legal stamps. My heart sank as I recognized what they were. Custody documents. "I've already spoken with my attorney," Camille continued, her voice matter-of-fact, as if she were discussing the weather instead of my grandson's future. "As their mother, I have full legal rights to determine their care." "Of course you do," I said slowly, not understanding where this was headed. "They're your sons." The smile that crossed her face then was the coldest thing I'd ever seen. "Yes, they are. And I've decided that you should take them." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What? You heard me. I want you to have full custody." She thrust the papers toward me. "I've already signed everything. You just need to add your signature." I stared at the documents, my mind reeling. This was what I'd hoped for, what I'd been too afraid to even suggest. The boys needed me, and God knew I needed them. But the way she was presenting it, like she was doing me a favor instead of abandoning her children. "Camilsha," I said carefully, "are you sure about this? They've just lost their father. They need their mother now more than ever." She laughed, a sound completely inappropriate for a cemetery, especially one where we'd just buried her husband. "Oh, Marion, you're so naive. Those boys will be fine with you. You raised Leonard well enough. Didn't you?" There was something underneath her words, something that made my stomach clench with dread. "What aren't you telling me?" She leaned closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "I want the beach house and Leonard's company. All of it." The truth hit me like a sledgehammer. This wasn't about what was best for Xavier and Malik. This was about money, about inheritance laws and legal complications she wanted to avoid. "You can't be serious," I breathed. "I'm completely serious." She straightened up, her mask of false concern slipping entirely. "Leonard left everything to me." "Of course, but having the boys complicates things. Trusts, college funds, legal responsibilities I don't want to deal with. This way is cleaner." I looked down at Xavier and Malik, who were listening to every word with wide, confused eyes. They didn't understand the legal implications, but they could sense the coldness in their mother's voice, the way she was talking about them like burdens to be disposed of. "What about them?" I asked, my voice shaking with barely controlled anger. "What about what they need?" "They need you," she said simply. "You're the one who's always been there for them anyway. I'm just making it official." The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. She was right that I'd been there. For every scraped knee Leonard couldn't handle, every school play he missed due to work, every time Camille decided the boys were too much trouble and dropped them off at my apartment for days at a time. But this felt different. This felt final. "And if I don't sign?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Her smile returned, sharp as a blade. Then I'll exercise my rights as their mother. Put them in the best boarding school money can buy. Leonard's money. Of course. They'll get an excellent education, far better than anything you could provide on a nurse's salary. The threat was clear. Sign the papers and keep the boys close, or refuse and lose them entirely to some cold institution where they'd be nothing more than another source of income for her. I looked at the documents again, my hands shaking. At the bottom of the page, I could see the terms clearly laid out. Full custody to me, with Seora retaining no legal obligations or responsibilities. No child support, no visitation requirements, no financial contributions to their care. She was buying her freedom with my grandson's inheritance. I need time to think about this. I said, "No, you don't." She pulled out a pen and held it out to me. "Sign now, or I call my attorney and set up the boarding school interviews." Your choice. Xavier's small hand slipped into mine, squeezing tight. When I looked down at him, I saw Leonard's eyes staring back at me. Confused, frightened, but trusting. Trusting me to protect him when no one else would. I took the pen. As I signed my name on the custody papers, I felt like I was signing away more than just legal responsibility. I was signing up for late nights with homework. I barely understood. Grocery bills that would stretch my budget to breaking. And the impossible task of being both grandmother and mother to two traumatized little boys. But as Camille collected the papers with obvious satisfaction, tucking them back into her folder like a business transaction completed, I also felt something else. A fierce, protective love that made every sacrifice worth it. "There," she said, straightening her coat. "That wasn't so difficult, was it?" She turned to Xavier and Malik then, kneeling down to their level for the first time all day. "Boys, you're going to live with Grandma Marion now. Won't that be fun?" Malik started crying again, reaching out for her. "Mommy, I want to come home with you." She patted his head absently like she was petting a dog. "Oh, sweetheart. Mommy has to travel for work now, but Grandma will take such good care of you." The lie came so easily. I almost believed she'd convinced herself it was true. But I could see it in her eyes. The relief, the freedom she thought she'd just bought herself. As we walked toward the parking lot, Camille fell into step beside me. "You know, Marion, this really is for the best. You've always been better with children than I am." I didn't trust myself to respond. If I opened my mouth, I might say something I'd regret in front of the boys. "I'll send their things over tomorrow," she continued. "And don't worry about the financial aspects. Leonard's life insurance should cover most of their needs." Life insurance that would go to her, of course, along with the beach house, the company, the savings accounts, everything Leonard had worked so hard to build for his family's security. When we reached my car, she leaned down to kiss both boys goodbye. They clung to her despite everything because she was still their mother, still the person they wanted to love them back. "Be good for Grandma," she said, already backing away. "Mommy will call you soon." It was the last promise she would break, though I didn't know it yet. As I buckled the boys into my back seat, watching Camille drive away in Leonard's expensive SUV without a single look back, I made a silent promise of my own. I would love these children with everything I had. I would give them the stability and security their mother had just traded away for money. And someday, somehow, I would make sure they understood that they were worth more than any inheritance. They were priceless. The first week was the hardest. Xavier and Malik cried themselves to sleep every night in my small guest room, calling for their mother who never called back. I'd rock them until my arms ached, singing the same lullabies I'd sung to Leonard 30 years ago. During the day, I tried to maintain some sense of normalcy. I enrolled them in the elementary school near my apartment, a far cry from the private academy they'd attended before. The teachers were kind but overwhelmed, dealing with classes twice the size of what the boys were used to. Mrs. Blake, Xavier said one afternoon, using Leonard's last name the way he always had. Why doesn't Mommy want to see us anymore? I knelt down to his level in my tiny living room where his backpack and Malik's were scattered among the toys I'd hastily bought at the dollar store. How do you explain abandonment to an 8-year-old? How do you tell a child that his mother chose money over him? Sometimes grown-ups make decisions that don't make sense to us, I said, pulling him onto my lap. But what matters is that you're loved and safe. But I miss her, he whispered against my shoulder. I know, sweetheart. I know. That night, after the boys were finally asleep, I called the attorney Leonard had used for his will. Harold Benton was a kind man who'd known our family for years, and his voice was heavy with sympathy when I explained the situation. Marion, I have to be honest with you, he said after I'd told him everything. What Camille did was perfectly legal. As the surviving spouse, she inherited everything, and as the boys' mother, she had every right to place them in your care. But she abandoned them. I protested, pacing my small kitchen. She signed away all responsibility. Doesn't that count for anything, morally absolutely? Legally. It's complicated. I could hear him shuffling papers on his desk. The custody documents she had you sign are ironclad. She terminated her parental rights voluntarily, which means she has no legal obligation to support them financially. My heart sank. So, there's nothing we can do. I didn't say that. His voice brightened slightly. Give me some time to research this. There might be options, especially if we can prove that Leonard intended for the boys to benefit from his estate. For 2 weeks, I allowed myself to hope. Harold called regularly with updates. He was looking into trust structures, examining the original will, consulting with colleagues who specialized in inheritance law. Meanwhile, life moved forward, whether I was ready or not. The boys' clothes from their old house arrived in garbage bags delivered by a moving company Camille had hired. No personal note, no explanation. Just their belongings dumped on my doorstep like unwanted furniture. I spent my days off from the hospital trying to make my apartment feel like home for them. I pushed my dining table against the wall to make room for a secondhand desk where they could do homework. I hung their drawings on the refrigerator and bought a small bookshelf for Malik's collection of picture books. The hardest part was the questions from strangers. Other parents at school pickup, neighbors in the hallway, even some of my coworkers at the hospital. Everyone wanted to know where the boy's mother was. Why I was suddenly parenting again at 59. Their mother is adjusting to widowhood became my standard response. It was kinder than the truth and saved the boys from having to hear their abandonment discussed by adults who didn't know them. 3 weeks after Leonard's funeral, Harold called with news I'd been dreading. I'm sorry, Marion. I've exhausted every legal avenue. The will is airtight. Everything goes to Camille as the surviving spouse. And since she voluntarily relinquished custody, the boys have no claim to any of Leonard's assets. I sank into my kitchen chair, watching through the window as Xavier and Malik played in the small courtyard outside our building. They were adapting better than I'd expected, making friends with the other kids in our complex, but I could see the sadness that never quite left their eyes. What about Leonard's life insurance? I asked. Also goes to her, since she was the named beneficiary. Harold's voice was gentle but firm. I know this isn't what Leonard would have wanted, but legally, we don't have a case. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, staring at the bills spread across my table. The boys needed new winter coats. Their shoes were getting too small, and Malik had asked if he could take piano lessons like he used to. My salary as a hospital nurse barely covered my own expenses, let alone supporting 2 growing children. That evening, I was helping Xavier with his math homework when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the Irish accent was unmistakable. Marion, it's Siersa. My grip tightened on the phone. It had been a month since the funeral, a month of silence, while her sons cried themselves to sleep, asking when Mommy would call. The boys will want to talk to you, I said, reaching for Xavier's shoulder. Oh, no. Don't bother them. I'm sure they're busy with homework or something. Her voice was bright and cheerful, like she was calling an old friend instead of the children she'd abandoned. I was actually calling to let you know I'll be traveling for a while. Traveling? Yes. I've decided to take some time to find myself. I suppose. I thought you should know in case you needed to reach me, though I can't imagine why you would. Through the phone, I could hear music in the background, laughter, the clink of glasses. She was at a party while her children did homework at a secondhand desk in my cramped apartment. Camille, I said carefully, the boys miss you? They ask about you every day. Well, children are resilient. They'll adjust. She paused, and I heard her say something to someone in the background. Listen, I have to run. Take care of them. Won't you? The line went dead. I stared at the phone for a long moment, fury building in my chest like a physical thing. Was that Mommy Malik appeared in the doorway? His stuffed elephant tucked under his arm. I forced a smile. Yes, sweetie. She wanted me to tell you she loves you very much. It was a lie, but it was the kind of lie that protects a child's heart. The truth that their mother was out partying while they struggled to understand why she didn't want them could wait until they were old enough to handle it. Over the next few months, I watched from a distance as Camille's life unfolded through social media posts that the boys were too young to see. Photos from Cabo, from New York, from Paris, designer dresses and expensive restaurants and handsome men who weren't Leonard. She was living the life she'd always wanted, funded by my son's hard work and sacrifice. Meanwhile, I was picking up extra shifts at the hospital, working weekends and holidays to pay for the boys' school supplies and clothes. The beach house Leonard had loved so much, the one where he taught the boys to fish and build sandcastles, was put up for sale within 2 months of his death. I drove by it once and saw the sold sign in the yard, a part of Leonard's legacy, gone to the highest bidder. The construction company he'd built from nothing lasted a little longer. Camille tried to run it for a few months, but without Leonard's knowledge and hands-on management, contracts started falling through. She sold it for a fraction of what it was worth to a competitor who kept the jobs, but changed the name. Everything Leonard had worked for, everything he'd built to secure his family's future, was disappearing piece by piece to fund his widow's extended vacation from responsibility. But as I watched the boys slowly begin to heal, as I saw Xavier's fierce determination in his schoolwork and Malik's gentle kindness with the other children, I realized something important. Camille could sell the house and the business could squander every dollar Leonard had earned. But she couldn't destroy the most valuable thing he'd left behind. His sons were growing up with integrity, with love, with the understanding that family meant more than money. They might not have inherited Leonard's wealth, but they had inherited something far more precious: his character. 6 months after the funeral, as I tucked them into their bunk beds in what had become their permanent bedroom, Xavier looked up at me with eyes that reminded me so much of Leonard. It took my breath away. "Grandma Marion," he said quietly, "when I grow up, I'm going to buy back Daddy's house, the one by the beach." "That's a lovely thought, sweetheart," I said, kissing his forehead. "I mean it," he insisted with the serious intensity only an 8-year-old could muster. "I'm going to get it all back. Everything Mommy took from us." As I turned off their light and closed the door, I couldn't shake the feeling that Xavier meant every word. And for the first time since Leonard's death, I allowed myself a small smile. Camille thought she'd won by trading her children for money. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated what love could build from nothing. 7 years passed like seasons changing slowly at first. Then, all at once, the boys grew from grieving 8-year-olds into teenagers with their father's strong jawline and my stubborn determination. Xavier, now 15, had inherited Leonard's head for business, while Malik, though quieter, possessed an emotional intelligence that reminded me of my son at his best. My small apartment had transformed over the years. The walls were covered with school photos, honor roll certificates, and Malik's artwork. Xavier's corner was dominated by a desk he'd built himself, surrounded by business books he'd borrowed from the library and notebooks filled with ideas that seemed far too sophisticated for a teenager. "Grandma, look at this," Xavier said one evening, spreading a newspaper across our kitchen table. He'd been tracking real estate prices in our old neighborhood for months, circling properties and making notes in the margins. The beach house, Leonard's beach house, was for sale again. The family who'd bought it from Camille 7 years ago was asking nearly double what they'd paid. "Remember what I told you when I was little?" Xavier asked, his finger tracing the property listing. "About buying it back." I remembered. How could I forget? It had been his constant refrain through middle school. His answer to every career day presentation and every "what do you want to be when you grow up" question. I remember I said, settling into the chair across from him, "But Xavier, honey, that's a lot of money. More than most people make in a lifetime." He looked up at me with eyes that were no longer a child. "I know. That's why I've been planning. At 15, while his classmates worried about prom dates and college applications, Xavier had been developing what he called his acquisition strategy. He'd read every business biography in our local library, subscribed to financial magazines with money from his part-time job at the grocery store, and somehow convinced the branch manager at our bank to let him observe loan meetings. "Mrs. Alvarez says I can start working more hours this summer," he continued, referring to his supervisor at the store. And I've been accepted to that business program at the community college, the one that lets high school students take classes. I felt a familiar mixture of pride and worry. Xavier's drive was admirable, but I'd seen what the pursuit of money could do to people. I'd watched it destroy Camille's ability to love her own children. "Just promise me," I said, reaching across the table to cover his hand with mine, "that you won't let success change who you are. Your father was a good businessman, but he was a better man." Xavier squeezed my hand. "I won't forget. Grandma, how could I? You remind me every day." And I did. Every dinner conversation included stories about Leonard, how he'd started his construction company with a pickup truck and a toolbox, how he'd never cheated a customer or shortchanged air, how he'd coached Little League on weekends even when he was exhausted from the work week. Malik listened to these stories, too, though his dreams ran in different directions. At 13, he was already volunteering at the animal shelter and talking about becoming a veterinarian. Where Xavier saw problems to solve with business solutions, Malik saw living creatures that needed care and protection. "Do you think Mom ever thinks about us?" Malik asked one night as I helped him with his biology homework. It had been over a year since he'd mentioned Camille, and the question caught me off guard. I looked at this boy who'd grown tall and lanky like his father, whose gentle nature had survived abandonment and loss. "I don't know, sweetheart. What made you think about her?" He shrugged the way teenagers do when they're trying to seem casual about something important. Camille at school was complaining about her mom being too strict. And I just wondered if our mom ever wonders how we turned out. The honest answer was that I doubted it. Camille's social media presence, which I occasionally checked despite knowing it would only upset me, showed a woman living for the moment, expensive vacations, designer clothes, and a rotating cast of wealthy men. No mention of the sons she'd left behind. "Some people," I said carefully, "show love differently than others. And sometimes people get so lost in their own problems that they can't see past them." It wasn't really an answer, but Malik nodded as if it made sense. He'd learned early to find comfort in possibility rather than certainty. The summer Xavier turned 16, something changed in our routine. He'd wake before dawn, not for his job at the grocery store, but to spend hours on the computer at our local library before it opened to the public. The librarian, Mrs. Nguyen, had given him special permission after he'd explained that he was researching business opportunities. "What exactly are you working on?" I asked him one morning as he rushed through breakfast. "A business plan," he said, around a mouthful of cereal. "Mrs. Nguyen says the library is getting new computers next month, and they're going to sell the old ones cheap. I want to buy them, refurbish them, and sell them to families who can't afford new ones." I paused in packing Dai's lunch. "Where are you going to get the money to buy them? I've been saving everything from my job for 2 years, he said, grabbing his backpack. "And I talked to Mr. Wallace at the bank about a small business loan. He says if I can show him a solid business plan, he'll consider it." After he left, I stood in my kitchen, feeling a mixture of amazement and fear. Xavier wasn't just talking about buying back his father's house anymore. He was building the foundation to make it happen. That fall, Xavier's computer refurbishing business took off in ways none of us had expected. Word spread through our community about the reliable, affordable computers available through Xavier's Tech Solutions. Parents saving for their children's education. Elderly residents wanting to stay connected with distant family. Small business owners who couldn't afford retail prices all became his customers. He operated out of our apartment storage unit with Malik helping after school to test equipment and organize inventory. I watched them work together, remembering how Leonard and I had run his first construction jobs from our kitchen table. "Look at this," Xavier said one evening, showing me a spreadsheet on his laptop. "If I keep growing at this rate and reinvest the profits, I should have enough for a down payment on the beach house by the time I'm 25. 25. He'd been planning this for 7 years, and he still had almost a decade to go. The patience and determination it required seemed impossible for someone his age. "That's wonderful, honey," I said, though part of me worried about the intensity of his focus. "But remember, there's more to life than business deals and property ownership." He looked up from his computer with a smile that reminded me so much of Leonard. It made my chest tight. "I know, Grandma, but this isn't just about the house. It's about proving that what she did to us wasn't the end of our story. What she did to us." He rarely mentioned Camille by name anymore, but her abandonment had shaped him in ways I was only beginning to understand. Every success was a small victory against the woman who decided her children weren't worth the inconvenience. The winter Xavier turned 17, we received an unexpected visitor. I was making dinner when the doorbell rang, and through the peephole, I saw a well-dressed woman I didn't recognize. "Can I help you?" I asked through the door. "Mrs. B. Blake. My name is Denise Langford. I represent the Horizon Crest Holdings. I'd like to speak with you about your grandson's business." I opened the door, confusion and worry wearing in my chest. Which grandson, Xavier? We've been tracking his success with remarkable interest. She was younger than me, probably in her 40s, with the kind of polished appearance that suggested expensive education and even more expensive clothes. When Xavier came home from school 20 minutes later, he stopped short at seeing her at our kitchen table. "This is Ms. Langford," I explained. "She says she knows about your business." Xavier's expression immediately became guarded. "What kind of interest?" Margaret smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "The kind that could change your life, Xavier. We'd like to make you an offer." For the next hour, she laid out a proposal that sounded almost too good to be true. Horizon Crest Holdings wanted to buy Xavier's business and hire him as a consultant while he finished high school. They'd pay him more money than I made in 5 years, provide funding for college, and give him experience with major real estate developments. "There's just one condition," Margaret said as she prepared to leave. "We'd need you to sign a non-compete agreement. You wouldn't be able to operate any similar business in this region for 10 years after your contract ends." After she left, Xavier and I sat in silence for a long time. The offer was generous beyond anything we could have imagined, but something about it felt wrong. "She knew too much about us," Xavier said finally, "about the beach house, about why I started the business. How did she know all that I'd been wondering the same thing?" There were only a few people who knew Xavier's full story, and most of them were sitting in this apartment. 2 days later, we got our answer. Malik came home from school with news that made my blood run cold. Jimmy's mom works at the real estate office downtown, he said, dropping his backpack by the door. "She says that Irish lady has been asking questions about our family, about Xavier's business, and whether we might be interested in selling." Irish lady. My heart sank as the pieces fell into place. Camille's was back. The call came on a Tuesday morning, 8 years after Camille had walked away from us in that cemetery. I was getting ready for my shift at the hospital when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Marion." "It's me." I knew that voice, even though it sounded different now. Older, less confident than I remembered. I sank into my kitchen chair, my uniform half buttoned, my hands suddenly shaking. "Camille, I know this must be a shock," she said, and I could hear traffic in the background. The sound of a city I didn't recognize. "But I need to see the boys. It's been too long." Too long. As if 8 years of abandonment was just an unfortunate gap in her social calendar. "Where are you?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. I'm coming home. Back to town. There are some things I need to take care of." Home. She called it home like she had any right to the word, like she hadn't sold every piece of Leonard's legacy and disappeared with the money. "The boys are in school," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Xavier's a senior now. Malik's a sophomore. They have lives, so routines, friends. I'm their mother, Marion." Her voice hardened with that familiar edge I remembered. "I have a right to see them. You gave up that right when you signed those papers." Silence stretched between us, filled with 8 years of birthday parties she'd missed, school plays she'd ignored, and nights I'd held her sons while they cried for a mother who'd chosen money over them. "I've changed," she said finally. "I know I made mistakes, but I'm ready to be part of their lives again." Mistakes like abandoning your children was equivalent to forgetting to return a library book. "Why now?" I asked another pause longer this time. "Does it matter I want to make things right?" But I could hear something underneath her words, a desperation that hadn't been there before, a tremor that suggested this wasn't entirely her choice. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the photos covering my refrigerator. 8 years of memories she hadn't been part of. Xavier's first business award. Malik's science fair trophy. Both boys at their school's honor society induction. A life built from love and sacrifice while she'd been living off their inheritance. That evening, I told the boys about the call. Xavier's reaction was immediate and cold. "No. Xavier, she's still your mother," I said gently. "She stopped being our mother the day she chose money over us." He was 23 now, tall and broad-shouldered like Leonard, with the same intense focus that had driven him to build his computer business into something remarkable. "I don't want to see her." Malik, now 21 and in his 3rd year of veterinary studies, was quieter in his response, but no less firm. "What does she want?" "Grandma, she says she wants to make things right after 8 years. Malik shook his head. "People don't just decide to be parents again after that long." Something must have happened. He was right. Of course, Malik had always been perceptive about people's motivations, even as a child. And something in Camille's voice had suggested this wasn't just a sudden attack of maternal instinct. Three days later, I found out what had really brought her back. Xavier burst through our apartment door that afternoon with a newspaper in his hand, his face flushed with excitement and something darker, a satisfaction I'd rarely seen in him. "Grandma, you need to see this." He spread the paper across our kitchen table, pointing to a small article in the business section. Horizon Crest. Holdings faces bankruptcy following failed luxury resort project. I read the article twice before the full implications hit me. The company that had tried to buy Xavier's business 2 years ago, the one connected to Camille's sudden interest in our family, had lost millions on a resort development that had fallen through due to environmental concerns. She invested in them, Xavier said, his voice tight with certainty. That's why she wanted my business. Why that woman came here with that offer. Camille needed money. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Camille hadn't developed maternal instincts after 8 years. She'd run through Leonard's inheritance and was looking for new sources of income. She's broke, I said quietly. Not just broke. According to my contact at the bank, she owes money. A lot of money. Xavier's eyes met mine, and I saw Leonard's steel in them. She needs us. That evening, when Camille called again, I was ready for her. I've been thinking about what you said. I told her about wanting to make things right. Oh, Marion, I'm so glad. I knew you'd understand. Where are you staying? Well, that's actually part of what I wanted to discuss. I was hoping. She trailed off, and I could almost hear her calculating how to frame her request. You need a place to stay just temporarily until I get back on my feet. I thought maybe the boys would like to have their mother close by. The audacity was breathtaking. She'd abandoned her children, sold their inheritance, and now expected us to house her while she figured out how to extract more money from the family she'd discarded. I think that's a wonderful idea, I said, ignoring Xavier's sharp look from across the room. Why don't you come for dinner tomorrow? We can discuss arrangements. After I hung up, Xavier stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Grandma, what are you doing, giving her exactly what she deserves? I said, reaching for the phone to call Malik. The next evening, Seosa arrived at our apartment carrying a single suitcase and wearing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She looked older than her 44 years, with lines around her mouth that suggested stress and worry had been her constant companions recently. Boys, she said, opening her arms as if 8 years of abandonment could be erased with a hug. Xavier remained seated at our kitchen table, his expression politely cold. Malik stood but didn't move toward her, his veterinary training evident in the way he observed her like he was assessing an injured animal. Hello? Camille? Xavier said, deliberately using her first name instead of any maternal title. Her smile faltered. Don't I get a hug? It's been so long. Yes, it has, Malik said quietly. 8 years, 2 months, and 16 days. The precision of his count hit like a slap. Camille's composure cracked slightly. And for a moment, I saw a genuine emotion cross her face. Shame, maybe, or regret. But it was gone so quickly, I might have imagined it. Well, she said, settling into the chair I offered. I suppose we have a lot to catch up on. Dinner was excruciating. Camillers tried to play the role of interested mother asking about school and work and friends, but her questions felt scripted, like she was following a manual for reconnecting with arranged children. The boys answered politely, but offered nothing beyond the basic facts she requested. Xavier, I heard you have quite the business empire now, she said as I served dessert. That must be very profitable. There it was, the real reason for her return, laid out as subtly as a brick through a window. I do well enough, Xavier said evenly. And Malik, veterinary school must be expensive. I hope you're not drowning in student loans. I have a scholarship, Malik replied. And Xavier helps with what the scholarship doesn't cover. Camille's eyes lit up at this information. How generous of him. It's wonderful when family helps family, isn't it? The irony was so thick I could taste it. This woman who'd sold her children's inheritance was lecturing them about family obligations. After dinner, as the boys cleaned up, Camille pulled me aside in the living room. "They've grown into such fine young men," she said. But I could see her calculating gaze taking in Xavier's expensive laptop. The new furniture I'd bought with help from his business success. The framed photo of Malik's scholarship award ceremony. "No thanks to you," I said quietly. She flinched. "I know I made mistakes, Marion, but I'm here now. I want to be part of their lives. What you want," I said, "is part of their money." Her mask slipped entirely then, revealing the desperation underneath. "I'm in trouble. Real trouble. There are people. I owe money to people who don't accept payment plans. How much? $2 million. The number hung between us like a physical thing. 2 million? More than most people would see in their entire lives. Certainly more than a nurse's pension could cover. And you thought your sons, the children you abandoned, would just write you a check. They're successful," she said. And now I could hear the desperation clearly. Xavier's business, Malik's future as a veterinarian. They don't need all that money. They could help their mother. Their mother. I stood up, my voice shaking with fury. I'd held back for 8 years. "You stopped being their mother when you chose money over them. You don't get to claim that title now that you need something." As if summoned by my words, Xavier appeared in the doorway. "Is everything all right?" Camille turned to him with tears in her eyes. Real ones this time. "Xavier, sweetheart, I need your help. I've made some bad investments, and now I know about Horizon Crest Holdings." Xavier interrupted. "I know about the resort project. I know you're broke." Her face went white. "How did you—" "I make it my business to know things." His voice was calm, almost gentle. But there was something underneath it that made Camille step back, especially things that concern my family. "I'm your family," she whispered. "No," Xavier said, his eyes never leaving her face. "You were my mother. But family doesn't abandon each other when things get difficult. Family doesn't sell a child's inheritance to fund their own lifestyle. Family doesn't disappear for 8 years and then come back asking for money." Cyrus looked around desperately at me, at Malik, who'd appeared beside his brother, at the photos covering our walls that documented a life she'd chosen not to be part of. "I'll pay you back," she said. "Every penny. I just need help getting out of this mess." Xavier reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. "Actually, I have something for you." Hope flashed across Camille's face as she reached for it. But when she opened the envelope and saw the contents, the hope died instantly. Inside were copies of legal documents, property deeds, business incorporation papers, and at the very top, a photograph of a familiar house by the beach. "I bought it back," Xavier said simply. "Dad's house. I bought it back last month." Camille stared at the photo, her hands trembling. "How I've been planning this for 15 years. Ever since the day you sold it." Xavier's voice remained calm, but I could see the emotion in his eyes. "I also bought back Dad's company. Well, what was left of it. It took me 3 years to track down all the assets and rebuild what you destroyed, but I did it. The papers fluttered to the floor as Camille's legs gave out. She sank into the nearest chair, staring at her son like she was seeing him for the first time. Everything you sold, Xavier continued. Everything you traded for 8 years of freedom from responsibility. I bought it all back, and now I'm giving it where it belonged from the beginning. He turned to me, his expression softening. Grandma Marion, you've sacrificed everything to raise us. The house is yours. The company is yours. Everything you should have inherited when Dad died. It's finally yours. I stared at him, unable to process what he was saying. Xavier, I can't accept. You're not accepting anything, Malik said, moving to stand beside his brother. You're receiving what was always rightfully yours. What should have been yours from the day Dad died. Sears looked between us, her face cycling through shock, disbelief, and finally a desperate anger. You can't do this. Those assets. Leonard left them to me. I had every right to sell them. You did. Xavier agreed. Just like we have every right to buy them back and give them to the person who actually deserved them. I'm broke, she said, her voice cracking. I have debts. People are going to come looking for money I don't have. That's not our problem, Malik said quietly. You made your choices 8 years ago. We've made ours now. For a moment, I saw the woman say might have been vulnerable, frightened, genuinely remorseful. But then her expression hardened into something I recognized from that day at the cemetery. Fine, she said, standing up abruptly. Keep your little revenge fantasy, but don't pretend this is about justice or family values. You're just as cold and calculating as you accuse me of being. Maybe, Xavier said, but we never abandoned anyone who needed us. She grabbed her suitcase, her movements sharp with anger and humiliation. This isn't over. You think you're so clever, but there are legal ways to challenge this. I was Leonard's wife. I have rights, actually, Xavier said, reaching into another pocket. You don't. He handed her a single sheet of paper. As she read it, the color drained from her face entirely. A restraining order filed this morning, Xavier confirmed. Based on your history of abandonment and your recent attempts to manipulate us for financial gain, you're not allowed within 5 feet of any of us or any property we own. You planned this, she whispered. For 15 years, he said without apology. Ever since I was 8 years old and watched you walk away from your children at their father's funeral. Camille looked at me one last time, her eyes filled with something that might have been real regret. Marion, surely you can't approve of this. I thought about 8 years of double shifts, of choosing between groceries and the boys' school supplies, of holding them while they cried for a mother who never called. I thought about Leonard's dreams for his sons, and how I'd watch them grow into men who honored his memory through their actions, not their bank accounts. You made your choice 8 years ago, I said quietly. We're making ours now. After she left, the 3 of us sat in stunned silence. The apartment felt different somehow, as if a weight I hadn't realized we'd been carrying had finally been lifted. The house keys are in the envelope, Xavier said. Eventually, we can drive out there tomorrow if you want. See what needs to be done to make it feel like home again. I looked at these two young men who'd grown up too fast, who'd learned lessons about loyalty and sacrifice that no child should have to learn. They were nothing like the woman who'd given birth to them, and everything like the man who'd raised them for the brief time he'd had. Are you sure about this? I asked. Both of you worked so hard. We worked hard for family. Malik interrupted. You're our family. You're the only mother we've really ever had. As I held those property deeds in my trembling hands, looking at legal documents that represented Leonard's dreams restored, I realized that Xavier had kept his childhood promise in ways I'd never imagined. He hadn't just bought back a house. He'd reclaimed a legacy of love over greed, of loyalty over convenience. And for the first time since that terrible day at the cemetery, I felt like Leonard could rest in peace. 6 months after Camille's humiliating departure, I was finally beginning to understand the full scope of what Xavier had accomplished. The beach house, which I'd assumed would need extensive renovation after years of different owners, had been meticulously restored to exactly how Leonard had left it. You did all this? I asked Xavier as we walked through rooms that looked frozen in time. The same navy blue curtains Leonard had hung in the living room, the same fishing photographs on the walls, even the same worn leather chair where he used to read his Sunday paper. I bought it back 3 years ago, Xavier admitted, running his hand along the familiar wooden banister. But I wanted to wait until the right moment to give it to you. I had contractors working on it gradually, using photos I found in Dad's old albums as reference. Every detail was perfect, too perfect for coincidence. This hadn't been just about buying back property. It had been about preserving Leonard's memory exactly as it should be. The boys helped, Xavier continued, nodding toward Malik, who was setting up the old fishing rods in their familiar corner. We'd come out here on weekends while you were working, making sure everything was exactly right. I sank into Leonard's chair, overwhelmed by the familiar smell of sea salt and the sound of waves that had provided the soundtrack to some of our happiest family moments. How long have you been planning this? Since I was 8, Xavier said simply. But the real planning started when I was 15. That's when I realized it wasn't enough to just buy back what she sold. I needed to make sure she could never hurt us again. He pulled out a tablet and showed me a timeline that took my breath away. 15 years of meticulous planning, tracking Camille's movements, her investments, her debts. He'd known about the Horizon Crest Holdings investment before she'd made it. He'd predicted her financial troubles before they became desperate. Xavier, I said slowly, what exactly did you do? His expression was calm, but I could see Leonard's determination in his eyes. I made sure she faced consequences for her choices. Over the next hour, he explained how he'd quietly bought shares in companies Camille invested in, how he'd influenced business decisions that led to her losses, how he'd carefully orchestrated the circumstances that brought her back to us desperate and broke. The restraining order was just the beginning. He continued, I've also filed reports with the IRS about her unreported income from Dad's estate. Turns out, she never properly declared the proceeds from selling his company. I stared at my grandson, this young man who'd grown from a grieving 8-year-old into someone capable of such calculated justice. Isn't that illegal? No. Unethical? Maybe. But neither is abandoning your children and selling their inheritance. His voice remained steady, but I could hear the years of hurt underneath it. She taught me that family means nothing when money is involved. I learned the lesson well. Malik joined us then, having finished organizing the fishing equipment. The authorities are also investigating her business partnerships. Apparently, there were some questionable deals involving properties she shouldn't have had access to. I looked between my grandsons, these men who'd become strangers to me in some ways. What about forgiveness? What about being the bigger person? We forgave her years ago, Malik said quietly. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting consequences. It doesn't mean pretending that actions don't have repercussions. Xavier nodded. She chose money over family. Now she gets to live with that choice. All of it. That evening, as we sat on the beach house deck watching the sunset, I tried to reconcile the gentle boys I'd raised with the strategic minds that had orchestrated Camille's downfall. They weren't cruel. Everything they'd done was legal, calculated, and ultimately just. But the precision of it was unsettling. "Do you ever worry," I asked, "about becoming too much like her, too focused on money and revenge?" Xavier was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the waves. "Every day," he admitted. "That's why I needed to give this all to you. The house, the company, all of it. To prove to myself that I could choose family over profit. And because Malik added, 'You deserve to have what was rightfully yours from the beginning.'" 2 weeks later, we received word that Camille had been arrested, tax evasion, fraud, and what the newspapers called questionable business practices related to inheritance manipulation. The charges were serious enough to warrant federal investigation. I felt no satisfaction in her downfall, only a deep sadness for the woman she might have been if she'd chosen differently all those years ago. Xavier, however, seemed finally at peace. She won't be able to hurt anyone else's family now," he said as we read the news together. "Is it over then?" I asked. He looked up from the newspaper, and for a moment, I saw the 8-year-old boy who'd promised to buy back his father's house. For her, yes. For us, it's just beginning. That afternoon, Xavier showed me the plans he'd been working on for Leonard's reconstructed company. Not just construction anymore, but affordable housing development, specifically for single mothers and elderly people on fixed incomes. Dad always said business should serve people, not the other way around, Xavier explained, spreading blueprints across the kitchen table. I want to build something he'd be proud of. Malik had plans, too. A veterinary clinic that would provide low-cost services for families who couldn't afford regular pet care. "Animals don't choose their families," he said, "but they deserve love and care regardless." Looking at these projects, I realized that Camille's abandonment had created something she never intended. 2 men who understood the value of true wealth. Not money, but security. Not profit, but purpose. Not taking, but giving. "There's one more thing," Xavier said as the sun set over the beach. "I want you to know that we planned all of this not out of hate for her, but out of love for you and for Dad's memory." He pulled out a final document, incorporation papers for the Marion Blake Foundation, dedicated to supporting grandparents raising their grandchildren. "We wanted to make sure other families don't go through what we did," Malik explained, "and that other grandmothers like you get the support they deserve." As I read through the Foundation's mission statement, tears blurred my vision. These boys, these men had taken their pain and transformed it into purpose. They'd taken abandonment and turned it into activism. The foundation will run everything, Xavier continued. The company, the properties, the investments. You'll never have to work again unless you want to. But more importantly, you'll be helping other families stay together when the world tries to tear them apart. That night, alone in Leonard's house for the first time in 15 years, I walked through rooms filled with memories and possibilities. The boys had gone back to their own apartments, giving me space to process everything that had happened. In the master bedroom, I found something that made me sink to my knees in gratitude and grief. On the dresser, in the exact spot where Leonard used to keep his wallet and keys, was a framed photo I'd never seen before. It showed me and the boys at Xavier's high school graduation, all of us beaming with pride and love. But it was the inscription that broke my heart. For the mother who chose love over convenience, sacrifice over selfishness, and family over everything else. With eternal gratitude, Leonard's sons. They'd signed it Xavier and Malik Blake. Not their mother's name, not even their father's name technically, since I'd never legally adopted them. My name. As I held that photo, I realized that Xavier's plan had accomplished something far more important than revenge or justice. It had proven that family isn't about blood or legal documents or inherited wealth. It's about who shows up, who stays, who chooses love even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult. Sarah had taught her sons a valuable lesson, though not the one she'd intended. She'd shown them exactly what kind of person they didn't want to become. And in choosing differently, they'd given me the greatest gift possible, the knowledge that 15 years of sacrifice had created something beautiful and lasting. Outside, the waves crashed against the shore in their eternal rhythm, washing away the pain of the past and making room for whatever came next. For the first time since Leonard's death, I felt ready for the future. 1 year later, I stood in the very cemetery where this story began. But this time, I wasn't grieving. I was celebrating. It was Leonard's birthday, and for the first time since his death, I felt his presence, not as loss, but as love continuing through the lives he'd touched. Xavier and Malik had driven me here in the morning, carrying fresh flowers and a bottle of Leonard's favorite whiskey, not to drink, but to pour on his grave, as he'd always joked he wanted. The tradition felt right, connecting us to the man who'd shaped us all. "I think he'd be proud," Malik said, adjusting the flowers we'd placed on the headstone of what we built, of what we became. "I know he would be," I replied, my voice steady now where it had once broken. "You've both become the kind of men he dreamed of raising." Xavier stood quietly beside his father's grave, and I could see him having a private conversation with Leonard's memory. After a few minutes, he turned to us with tears in his eyes, but a smile on his face. "I told him about the foundation," he said, "about the families we've helped, about you living in his house again. In the past year, the Marion and Blake Foundation had supported 43 grandparents who'd taken custody of their grandchildren under difficult circumstances. We'd provided legal aid, financial support, and most importantly, a community of people who understood the unique challenges of parenting again later in life. The reconstruction company had built affordable housing units for 20 families, including 3 single mothers who'd been living in their cars. Malik's veterinary clinic had provided free pet care to over 200 families who couldn't afford to keep their beloved animals healthy. But the most satisfying part wasn't the numbers. It was the thank you letters from children who got to stay with grandparents instead of entering foster care, from families who had homes instead of shelters, from elderly people whose pets remained their companions instead of being surrendered to shelters. "There's something else," Xavier said as we walked back to the car. "Something I wanted to tell you both on Dad's birthday." He pulled out an envelope, not the legal documents and property deeds of a year ago, but something smaller and more personal. "I've been in touch with some of Dad's old friends from high school. They're organizing a memorial scholarship in his name for kids who want to learn construction trades. Kids who need second chances like Dad did when he was young. Leonard had dropped out of college to support his sick mother. I remembered he'd learned construction by working alongside men who were willing to teach him, and he'd never forgotten how those mentors had changed his life. The first recipient is a 17-year-old girl whose parents died in a car accident." Xavier continued. "She's been living with her grandmother, working part-time to help with expenses." "Sound familiar?" I laughed through sudden tears. "Very familiar." As we drove back to the beach house, I reflected on how different this drive felt from the one 15 years ago. Then, I'd been carrying 2 traumatized children to an uncertain future in a cramped apartment, wondering how we'd survive. Now, those children were successful men who'd chosen to use their success to help others. The uncertain future had become a life of purpose and meaning that exceeded anything I could have imagined. That evening, we had dinner on the deck as we did every Sunday. Now, a tradition that honored Leonard's memory while celebrating the family we'd built from the ashes of loss and abandonment. "Any word on Camille's trial?" I asked, though I'd been avoiding following the news too closely. "Sentencing is next month," Xavier replied, his tone neutral. "Her lawyers are pushing for a plea deal, but the federal charges are serious. Tax evasion, fraud, conspiracy. She's looking at significant jail time." I felt the familiar mix of sadness and justice that accompanied any mention of her name. Do you think she understands now what she lost?" Malik considered this thoughtfully. "I think she understands what she gave up, but I don't think she understands what she lost because she never really knew what she had." It was a wise distinction. Camille had given up 2 children and the life they could have built together, but she'd never understood the love, loyalty, and joy that made those relationships valuable in the first place. "I used to hate her," Xavier admitted, staring out at the waves. "For years, that hatred drove me. It motivated every business decision, every strategic move. But sitting here now in Dad's house with the family that actually matters, I realized hatred was just weighing me down." "What do you feel now?" I asked. He was quiet for a long moment. "Pity, mostly. She had everything that mattered and traded it for things that didn't. She'll spend the rest of her life knowing she made that choice." 2 weeks later, we received a letter that none of us had expected. It came through Xavier's attorney from Camille's lawyer, and it was brief, but surprising. She wanted to write to us, not to ask for money or help, but to apologize. "It's probably just a legal strategy," Xavier said, reading the request. "Something her lawyer thinks will help with sentencing." "Maybe." Malik agreed, but maybe not. Maybe facing consequences has finally taught her something. I looked at both of them. These men who'd grown from abandoned children into leaders who chose forgiveness over bitterness. "What do you think we should do, I think?" Xavier said slowly. "That we should let her write her letter, and then we'll decide if we want to read it." The letter arrived a week later, written in Camille's careful handwriting on prison stationery. Xavier opened it first, read it silently, then passed it to Malik without comment. After Malik finished reading, they both looked at me. "It's genuine," Malik said quietly. "She doesn't ask for anything. She just apologizes. Really apologizes." I took the letter with trembling hands and read words I'd never expected to see from the woman who'd walked away from us 15 years ago. She wrote about the years of therapy in prison, about finally understanding the magnitude of what she'd done. She wrote about the dreams where she saw Xavier and Malik as children, calling for a mother who never answered. She wrote about the realization that money meant nothing when you had no one to share it with. Most surprisingly, she wrote about me, Marion, and gave my children the love I was too selfish and scared to give. She'd written, "She became the mother I should have been. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness, but I want you all to know that I finally understand what I threw away. And I'm grateful, truly grateful, that my boys had someone who loved them the way they deserved to be loved." The letter ended with a simple sentence that made me cry. "Please tell them their mother finally learned what love actually means. It's too late for me to show them, but it's not too late for me to acknowledge the truth." We sat in silence for a long time after I finished reading. Outside, the waves continued their eternal rhythm, indifferent to human pain and redemption alike. "Do you believe her?" Xavier asked finally. "I think it doesn't matter," I replied. "Whether she means it or not, she's right about one thing. It's too late for her to be the mother you needed, but it's not too late for her to face the truth about her choices." Malik nodded. "And it's not too late for us to choose forgiveness, even if we can't choose reconciliation." That night, I wrote my own letter, not to Camille, but to Leonard. I told him about the men his sons had become, about the lives they'd touched, about the legacy of love that continued through their actions. I told him that his death hadn't been meaningless, that from the worst moment of our lives had grown something beautiful and lasting. The family he'd dreamed of, built on loyalty, sacrifice, and unconditional love, had survived everything that tried to destroy it. As I sealed that letter and placed it in the box with all the others I'd written to him over the years, I realized that Xavier's childhood promise had been fulfilled in ways none of us could have imagined. He hadn't just bought back a house. He'd reclaimed the idea that love is the only inheritance that truly matters. 5 years later, as I watched Xavier teach his own son to fish from the same pier where Leonard had taught him, I knew that the cycle of love would continue. Camille's attempt to destroy our family had ultimately made it stronger, more intentional, more grateful for what we had. The house she'd sold for money had become a foundation for helping others. The children she'd abandoned had grown into men who chose family over profit, love over convenience, forgiveness over hatred. And I, the grandmother who'd never expected to raise children again, had been given the privilege of watching two boys become men of integrity and purpose. In the end, justice wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about love persisting despite betrayal, about family bonds that couldn't be broken by greed or selfishness, about the truth that some inheritances can't be bought or sold. As the sun set over the beach that had witnessed so much joy and sorrow, I felt Leonard's presence again, not as loss, but as legacy. His love lived on in his sons, in the families they'd helped, in the community they'd built. Camille had learned too late that love is the only wealth that multiplies when shared. But her sons had learned that lesson early, and they'd built their lives around it. That was the inheritance that truly mattered. That was the justice that endured long after courts and prisons had done their work. Love had won. Family had endured. And the little boy who'd promised to buy back his father's house had kept his word in ways that transcended property deeds and bank accounts. He'd bought back his father's dream of a family built on love, loyalty, and the unshakable belief that some bonds can survive anything. Now, I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here. And now, as this long walk from a cold graveside to a warm beach house full of second chances drifts farther away from you, let the sharpest pieces begin to soften. The sound of dirt hitting a coffin, the sting of your own child being traded for a beach house, the quiet click of a pen signing away custody, all of that can start to blur now. Like headlights fading down a dark coastal road. You've just spent time with a Black grandmother who was handed 2 frightened little boys and a mountain of bills instead of an inheritance, who worked herself past exhaustion while their mother took their father's money and ran. And you watched those boys grow into men who did something extraordinary. They bought back what greed had stolen. They protected the woman who had protected them, and they used their power to help other families stand where she once stood alone. Maybe there were moments when something in your own chest ached, remembering times you were left to clean up someone else's mess or raise children through someone else's choices. You're allowed to keep the strength of her story and gently set down some of the bitterness that came with it. If anyone has ever made you feel like you were lucky just to be included, or acted as if your love and labor were worth less than their money, let this settle over you like a warm blanket. You are not a backup plan. You are not a temporary solution. You are the steady center that other people quietly build their whole lives around, whether they ever say it out loud or not. So, wherever you are right now, in bed, curled on the couch, or listening in the dark with your eyes already heavy, notice how your body starts to let go. Let your shoulders drop. Unclench your jaw. Let your hands rest instead of brace. Feel each breath come in slowly and leave even slower, like waves sliding in and out beneath that old pier at night. You don't have to decide tonight how to forgive, what to reclaim, or which doors to finally close. For these next few moments, your only job is to breathe and let your thoughts drift farther and farther away, like tide foam pulled gently back out to sea under a soft, steady moon. Let your heart hear this almost like a whisper. You are not invisible. You are not too late. And you are not alone in how this feels. When your eyes are ready to close, let them. Let this story sink to the bottom of your mind like a smooth stone in deep, calm water. And as sleep moves toward you, rest in the quiet truth that you matter, just as you are, exactly where you are tonight.